India is ready to play a larger global role in the global landscape, says Prime Minister Modi in an exclusive interview to Money Control. Defends the government's record on inflation, saying prices in India are below the global average, adds the global south is bearing the brunt of climate change, even though it did very little to create the problem in the first place. Stock markets reverse early losses, end in the green for day 4 in a row. The Sensex and the Nifty closed with modest gains, helped by FMCG and pharma stocks. Bank Nifty fails to keep its head above water. The rupee weakens to a 3-week low as banks buy dollars for oil importers amidst rising global crude oil prices. Crude prices hit the highest level in 10 months as Saudi Arabia and Russia extend supply cuts to the end of the year. Brent crude breaches $90 a barrel in intraday trade. Sugar prices in India soared to a 6-year high ahead of the festive season as estimated output falls over 3% on a yearly basis. There is speculation in the markets about a likely export halt. Marquee sugar stocks rally in trade. The Supreme Court stays the Karnataka High Court's order that quashed the 21,000 crore rupee GST show cause notice against Gameskraft. The government's GST enforcement agency had claimed that Gameskraft offered betting and gambling services worth 77,000 crore rupees between 2017 and June of 2022. The agency had sent them a notice seeking 21,000 crore rupees in taxes. The biggest global tech IPO in 2 years is around the corner. SoftBank Group's arm plans a $4.8 billion Nasdaq listing. This will value the chip designer at close to $55 billion. That's lower than the $64 billion valuation it commanded just last month. Reports suggest that the special session of Parliament may commence in the old building and shift to the new one starting day 2. Congress leader Sonia Gandhi writes to the Prime Minister seeking details of the government's agenda, calls for discussions on 9 issues including rising inflation and unemployment, the unrest in Manipur and renewed tensions between India and China. The Supreme Court grants interim protection from arrest to the president of the Editors Guild and 3 members of the Guild's fact-finding team named in the FIR filed by the Manipur government. Orders that no coercive action be taken against the petitioners till the 11th of September. SpaceX might be one of the many investors who funded Elon Musk's Twitter acquisition. Musk borrowed $1 billion from SpaceX in the same month he acquired Twitter for $44 billion. Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. First up, the day's trading action. The markets regained intraday losses, ending the day higher for the 4th straight day. The Nifty up by about 36 points. The Sensex up by 100 points. And the Nifty mid-cap continues to, of course, hold strong. That closed in positive territory. The Nifty Bank today under pressure. It was down about 100-odd points. Banks falling the most today, as we just pointed out. But on to the big news maker this evening. India is ready to play a larger role, says Prime Minister Modi in an exclusive interview to moneycontrol.com. Speaking to Network 18's Rahul Joshi, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "Our demography, especially the fact that we are home to the largest population of youth in the world, makes us extremely relevant for the planet's future. It also gives nations of the world a strong reason to partner with us in the pursuit of progress." The Prime Minister also defended his government's record on inflation. He said, and I quote, "Even in the first face of adversities and global dynamics, India's inflation was 2 percentage points lower than the global average inflation rate in 2022. He's also called for the world to come together to fight inflation, saying, and I quote again, "Both advanced countries and emerging economies are facing high inflation. This is a global issue that needs close cooperation." The Prime Minister also spoke out against what he called the might is right culture. He said, and I quote, "Today the pressure is on natural resources and infrastructure, and it's increasing. At such a time, it is vital that the world shall recognize shared prosperity through the optimum utilization of resources, which is the only way forward." That is the Prime Minister. And finally, on climate change, the Prime Minister said, different countries of the world, especially the global south, are at the receiving end of the impact of the climate crisis, despite having done very little to create the problem in the first place. You can, of course, catch the full interview on moneycontrol.com as well as on CNBC-TV18.com. But lots of reactions coming in to what the Prime Minister has had to say. Take a look.
India is showing leadership on, for example, if you see some of the changes coming through on the global regulation of crypto assets, on how and at least trying to build a consensus around the issue of climate financing. So these are long-term issues. I think to expect a G20 level resolution to start impacting the economy in the very near term is something I think would be unwise.
I think macros are improving, and I fully in agreement with the statement that India was able to or has been able to manage the macros much better, particularly on the inflation front. If you see that many countries are still struggling with the sticky inflation despite whatever rate hikes they have been doing. So I think while the focus, as stated by the governor himself, is that the inflation is the prime target they'll be focusing on.
Both the sort of the bilateral conversations that happen at the very top level, as well as what has happened in the B20. There are a lot of economic payoffs and benefits in terms of access to markets, in terms of the ease of doing business in other countries.
We need not look at the G20 presidency as only a short-term influence on economic growth, but it is more likely to lead to a confluence of positivities for the Indian economy that might actually provide or propel the growth on the higher side and in a more sustainable sort of fashion.
भारत का जो प्रेसिडेंसी रहा है इस G20 का इस पूरे साल, इसका बहुत ही एक तरह से एक लास्टिंग इम्प्रेशन दुनिया के देशों के सोच पर, दुनिया के अर्थव्यवस्था पर और दुनिया के जियोपॉलिटिक्स पर बहुत एक बड़ा प्रभाव होगा.
Well, reactions to the Prime Minister's big interview. Now, India's sugar prices hitting a 6-year high amidst concerns over the impact of limited rainfall on production in key regions. And there is speculation in the markets that the government could halt exports to control prices. No confirmation just yet. Now, shares of sugar companies, including EID Parry, Sri Renuka and Dalmia Sugar, surging in trade today, up more than 5%. Manisha is standing by with the details. Manisha, what is leading to the kind of price rise that we are seeing, and perhaps the measures that the government may bring in by way of intervention to cool prices down?
Well, looks like that, and we've seen the sugar prices, as you said, trading at around 6-year highs in the Indian markets. It has been a 3% of a jump up in the last 2 weeks itself, and we're trading at around above 37 rupees per kg there. Also, it is a concern about the India weather conditions. Maharashtra and Karnataka, which are the two major producing states, have seen lower rains, and there are concerns of lower yields, and that has led to ISMA reducing the Indian output estimates down by 3.5% to around 31.7 million tons. Also, when you look at the export picture, I mean, that has been in debate as well. We did export 6 million tons last year, and this year there are concerns that the export could be much lesser, or it could be a halt after 7 years of constant exports, and that already is building up as a deficit in the international markets there. There are various reports suggesting, especially from International Sugar Organization, US Department of Agriculture, and the latest one comes in from a big sugar global trader, Albion, which says that 5.4 million tons of a global deficit is what you could be working with in 2023-24. So the global prices have been on a rise as well. You have the white sugar prices trading at 4.5-month highs, the London sugar prices at a 12-year highs as well. And it's not just about India. Brazil also, because of the rising crude prices, rising ethanol prices, could be diverting more towards ethanol rather than sugar, is also supporting sugar prices. And there are other countries like Thailand, Indonesia, which are also staring at a lower sugar crop this time around. So everywhere that you look, there is lesser sugar, more demand expectations, and that could be supportive for prices going forward.
All right, Manisha, many thanks for joining us. Now, shares of Evergrande up more than 70%, leading to a rally across Chinese stocks in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. This after another property developer, Country Garden, reportedly avoided default, bringing some relief to the country's crisis-hit property sector. Country Garden paid more than $22 billion in a bond coupon payment. So that's the latest there as far as China's real estate sector and property market is concerned. Now, SoftBank's chip designing company, the holding arm, has launched an initial public offering with a valuation of $52 billion this year. We learned that the prospective buyers include Apple and Alphabet, and they're likely to buy up to $735 million in shares at the IPO price. Hormuz joins us now with the details. Hormuz, take us to the contours of this IPO as well as the cut in valuation that we've seen in barely a month.
Absolutely, and it is the largest tech IPO. Before I get to the cut in valuations, it is the largest IPO in almost 2 years. And tech IPOs had taken a bit of a breather over the last 2 years because interest rates went up, so investors turned cautious. But now ARM, the SoftBank chip designer, is finally taking the plunge. And I'll tell you more about the issue first. Now, they've set the price band at $47 to $51, which implies a valuation of around $54.5 to $55 billion. Now, that valuation raises a bit of a question mark because just 3 weeks earlier, SoftBank had acquired the remaining 25% stake in ARM, which it does not directly own through its Vision Fund, at a valuation of $64 billion. So now the valuation is at a discount when it comes to the IPO. Now, most of ARM's customers, which includes the likes of Apple, Alphabet, Nvidia, all of them are coming together and buying shares in the IPO, and that total comes up to around 735 million. Now, what does ARM do? Well, most of our existence revolves around ARM because 99% of the world's smartphones use ARM-led technology, and 70% of the human population uses devices that are based on ARM's technology. Now, when it comes to SoftBank, this is not the first time that ARM is going public. It was a listed entity both in London and in New York until 2016 when SoftBank acquired it for $32 billion and took it private. Now, in 2020, Nvidia had announced a plan that it wanted to acquire ARM in a $40 billion deal. Now, over time, that deal valuation went up to $80 billion, and that is because it was a cash and stock deal. So as Nvidia's share price went higher, the deal valuation was directly proportional and it moved higher too. But the regulators both in the US and the UK threw a spanner in the deal, saying that it will kill competition and it should not happen at any cost. So eventually both companies gave up in 2022 and the deal was called off. And this was the trigger for this IPO, and this is the ARM IPO. It will be interesting to see the response, whether people are cautious or they give an arm and a leg to buy those shares.
Well, we'll have to see if they do. Hormuz, many thanks for joining us. That's the big IPO to watch out for, the big tech ARM IPO from the SoftBank stable. The Supreme Court has stayed the Karnataka High Court's order that quashed the 21,000 crore rupee GST show cause notice that was issued to Gameskraft. The government's GST enforcement agency had earlier claimed that Gameskraft had actually offered betting and gambling services worth 77,000 crore rupees between 2017 and June of 2022, leading to the show cause. Ashmit joins us now with more details. Ashmit, on the face of it, it certainly is a setback for Gameskraft. Take us through what the Supreme Court has observed today and what we can now expect over the next few days.
Right, so setback coming in for online gaming company Gameskraft. The Karnataka High Court order, which was in their favor in the dispute with the GST authorities, has now been stayed by the Apex Court. Keep in mind that Gameskraft is in receipt of a GST show cause notice seeking a payout of 21,000 crore rupees. The GST authorities are arguing that, look, you took as much as 77,000 crore rupees of bet money between 2017 and 2022, and that you're liable to pay 28% GST, and that adds up to 21,000 crore rupees. Now, importantly, the centre challenged this Karnataka High Court order, which had quashed their notice before the top court, and here they've argued that, look, this matter has been contested across very many high courts, that as many as 35 show cause notices are in the works. But importantly, they argued that there are existing Supreme Court rulings that have held in their favour, in the centre's favour, and therefore the Karnataka High Court order is not sustainable, cannot be permitted to proceed. So on that count, the prayer that they had sought was for a stay of the Karnataka High Court order. Importantly, the Supreme Court has, number one, allowed that stay. Number two, has observed that there is enough merit in this case that warrants further consideration by the top court. And importantly, the Chief Justice of India himself observed that he does not want for this particular ruling by the Karnataka High Court to become precedent for other high courts, and that is an important consideration. Importantly, the Supreme Court, as of right now, has not granted any restraint on the GST authorities from initiating recovery proceedings, so that for the Gameskraft will remain a question mark. But for now, notice has been issued. The company has to come back and file its reply within 3 weeks' time, and that's when we'll see further arguments and adjudication in this case.
Many thanks for joining us. This is going to be something that not just Gameskraft, but the entire online gaming sector is going to be watching very closely. Now, the Supreme Court has granted interim protection from arrest to 4 members of the Editors Guild of India after the Manipur police had filed an FIR against them. The case was registered against the journalists over a fact-finding report on the media coverage of the ethnic conflict in Manipur. The apex court has sought a response from the state government on the Editors Guild plea and will hear the matter on the 11th of September. Well, for more on all of our stories, do visit our website, CNBC-TV18.com. We will head into a break, but up next, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar says President Xi and President Putin skipping the G20 summit has nothing to do with India. That and more when we return. Days after Russia and China announced that the President Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping will not attend the G20 summit, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said this has nothing to do with India, adding that their positions on various issues will be reflected by their representatives. Now, invitation cards for the G20 summit that mentioned Bharat. Jaishankar said India, that is Bharat, is mentioned in the Constitution. He also urged everybody should read the Constitution.
There have been some presidents or prime ministers who, for whatever reason, have chosen not to come themselves. But, you know, that country and that country's position is obviously reflected by whoever is the representative on that occasion. I don't think it has anything to do with India. I mean, I think whatever decision they make, I mean, they would know best, but I would not at all see it the way you would suggest.
Invitation card which says Bharat and not India. Now that is the latest thing, that is G20 going to reposition India as Bharat and not India as India?
No, India, that is Bharat. It is there in the Constitution. Please, I would invite everybody to read it.
So it's not something which is new, it is something which existed in the Constitution, and so you didn't do, it's not a new roll of dice.
No, I think when you say Bharat, in a sense, a meaning and a understanding and a connotation that comes with it, and that is reflected in our Constitution as well.
Well, that is the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. Now, the 5-day special session of Parliament will commence on the 18th of September in the old building. However, it will shift to the new Parliament building on day 2. And Congress leader Sonia Gandhi has written to Prime Minister Modi seeking details of the government's agenda for the upcoming special Parliament session. In a letter, the Congress leader has said that the session was called without any prior consultation with the opposition parties. The letter also mapped out issues pertaining to the issue in Manipur and border tensions with China. Delhi police has issued a slew of advisories for people as we inch closer to the G20 summit. Traffic police have appealed to people to avoid walking or cycling near India Gate, as well as the Kartavya Path. Schools, colleges and offices will remain shut during the summit, which is between the 8th to the 10th of September. Essential services that include medical shops, pathology labs will remain open in New Delhi.
I would like to know, for the general public, which areas in central Delhi will be out of bounds?
See, central Delhi will be open to all the public. Major control zone will be in the New Delhi, that is NDMC area, New Delhi Police District, which is a very small area of the overall area of Delhi. All the services in other parts of Delhi, whether it is markets, whether it is bus service, city bus service, taxi, TSR, will operate as usual. We have made arrangements in such a way that if you want to go to the airport, you can avail metro services. We have given the alternative routes if you want to commute by car. Obviously, you have to plan your journey in advance.
Well, that is the Delhi police there on the security restrictions. Now, after testing negative for COVID, US President Joe Biden is set to travel to India for the upcoming summit. The White House has confirmed that President Biden will follow the COVID-19 guidelines of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention during his visit. The announcement comes after First Lady Jill Biden tested positive for COVID on Monday. Prime Minister Modi is set to leave for Indonesia to attend the 20th ASEAN-India Summit. According to officials, the summit will review the progress of India-ASEAN relations. Reports suggest a new proposal to boost maritime security cooperation will be launched after the Prime Minister holds talks with leaders in Jakarta on the 7th of September. Twitter's chief Elon Musk borrowed $1 billion from SpaceX in the same month the Twitter acquisition was underway. A Wall Street Journal reported that Musk made arrangements with banks to borrow against his shares of companies, including Tesla. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. Stay tuned to CNBC-TV18. The news will continue when we return. There's a lot more coming up.